Thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming this morning and taking your time to join us. We are going to have public comment first before we start our regular agenda. So without further ado, Mr. Rask, would you please like to come forward? Good morning.
Good morning. Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. There was an incident where a PSTA employee on the clock made some comments on PSTA's Facebook page, calling a person the worst kind of person, you make me sick, and that they're a loser weirdo, followed by 4 exclamation marks. This happened in response to some comments critical of PSTA and its board. Mr. Bradford, your COO, has dealt with that. The citizen that those comments was directed towards was me, but that's not the issue. I didn't lose any sleep over it. The issue is that it can chill the free speech of others, and you should go sometimes on PSTA's Facebook page, and you will see comments critical of PSTA from actual writers. And I have used PSTA too, but actual other writers. I handed out a flyer I put at your places where you're sitting, showing the plunging ridership, both for PSTA and HART. This is material I developed and through public records requests, was able to give out at both the TMA meeting and the TBARTA meeting, which were held here 3 and 10 days ago. This is not going to change. I also sent this board a while ago a link to a Cato policy paper called The Coming Transit Apocalypse. That's what you see developing. The language is, of course, a bit hyperbolic that the Cato Institute used in that headline. But the trend is clear. And Randall O'Toole, who is the Cato Institute transportation policy analyst, recently told me that he thinks that the changes you're seeing, such as ride sharing, working from home, other factors, will take away all, quote, all, most if not all of transit's constituency. So this is something you need to deal with. And I noticed coming in today that there are a lot of awards in the lobby, and PSTA likes to give out awards to employees and others for things they do. Where are the awards for no tax for tracks and people like that? Like Barb Hazelden, for instance, who was right when she in 2014 repeatedly said there is no need and no demand for more transit. She was right. I wish this board in unison could say Barb Hazelden was right. I think that would be asking a lot, though. I want to comment briefly on the CPAS program that is on your consent agenda. The prices are a bit too low, in my opinion. Tradewinds is paying $55 per day. That would allow them to ride a total of 2,025 people. And I'd like to know, will anyone track how many people actually ride under that program and whether the pricing is accurate? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. And we're going to begin today's meeting with a brief presentation from PSTA's Mandy Oglesby, who oversees PSTA's Expanding Corporate Partnership, or CPAS, problem. So, Mandy, maybe you have some responses in your comments to Mr. Rask, and if you don't, I'm sure that Mr. Kimball and Mr. Miraglia might. So please continue.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mandy Oglesby, and I'm the Business Development Coordinator here at PSTA. I started at PSTA just under a year ago, working on our existing UPass program, which provides unlimited transit access to students and staff at universities, colleges, educational facilities, as well as governmental agencies. That program has been incredibly successful, and we actually currently are partnered with USF St. Pete, SPC, as well as the City of St. Pete. We wanted to move beyond the UPass and create a program to reach out to our corporate entities that we call CPAS. Through CPAS, PSTA would partner with corporate entities, businesses, hotels, and resorts for an annual fee to provide unlimited transit access to employees and hotel guests, good on any PSTA bus or trolley along the beaches corridor and throughout Pinellas County. We began to focus and start on the beach, as this is the economic powerhouse of our region currently. Not only do we here at PSTA strive to provide reliable public transportation and increase ridership, but overall, to do this, we want to partner with community and businesses through these partnerships. PSTA is proud to have recently partnered with the Sheraton Sand Key, as well as the Marriott Clearwater Beach Sand Key, and the Tradewinds Island Grand Resort on St. Pete Beach. Here today to share support of the CPAS is Mr. Russ Kimball and Mr. Michael Maraglia.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kimball.
Russ Kimball, Sheraton Sand Key on Clearwater Beach. We heard about the CPAS about last spring in 2017, and as they, Mandy and Brad and all came to our meeting on the beach, and they talked about how Tradewinds was looking into it and starting it for their employees. She talked about how the benefit would also be our guest, that we could use it, and they were keeping it simple for all of us to try this new program on it, and we know the background from St. Pete College and I believe the city of St. Petersburg. And it intrigued us. So we got together and had coffee. And when we started, I was very concerned whether it would work or not and what the value was on it. We have 350 employees. How many would use them? Today, I would say it's probably, maybe not quite 10%, but somewhere close to that. There's more than it was last year. I've had employee rallies, and I say, how far have you been? And I hear Tampa, I hear Tarpon Springs, I hear downtown St. Pete, mostly on their day off. And then I have another gentleman, he's lives in Clearwater, and he's been with me for probably 10 years, and his car broke down, and he said, the heck with fixing that transmission. I'm going to ride the bus for the next year and save the money. So those are the reactions, been very good reaction from the employees, the benefit. This week we have a job fair on Clearwater Beach. I can offer free transportation to work and free parking that maybe our competitor on the other side of the island can't do. So I think they're great benefits for us to have. The other side of it is, as we made this agreement, we weren't sure of the numbers and all, as I mentioned, and legal took their form, and they made it work. And I'd go back at them and say, no, this isn't right. No, I can't live with this. But they made it right, and I made it right. So the legal department worked hard to see how this goes. I think we're all in a test period, so we're fortunate. The other thing is, I was very concerned about, and we were here one time for a meeting here on the Jolly Trolley in that area. That attitude is so important to all of us in tourism. That attitude of that bus driver really is what makes it. And I can tell you, it spread. The education that development and all did here for your employees to make this work is working. My guess, they're not sure. They could be a foreigner, and they got that room key is all they got, and they got 2 kids behind them, and they've never been to on Clearwater Beach before. They got here the night before, and they're going, how do I do this? What happens? Where do I go? Your drivers are the host, and they're making a difference. They are being a host. I have not had one complaint in the 3 months. So I thank you. Let's see how it goes for the rest of the year. We'll go forward from there. But you can use me as a recommendation. As far as cost, I'm not sure it's the right number or not. But I think let's give it a fair try and see where we are for both sides. I'll answer any questions or call me anytime. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kimball, would you be willing to come back at the end of the year and give us a status report of what you learned?
Yes, I believe we have a couple of steps that are going on in the meantime,
Good.
and that'll help us to determine where we would be.
Excellent. Questions, anyone? I don't see any lights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball.
Mr. Michael Maraglia, the GM of the Marriott.
Welcome, good morning.
Good morning. Again, Michael Moralia, General Manager of the Clearwater Marriott. We haven't been at it as long as the Sheraton. We started in mid-January, but so far I think it's an excellent program. First, my associates take great advantage of it. Provides less congestion, obviously, with traffic coming over, which I think is going to be key coming into season here. I've had nothing but great feedback from interactions with the drivers. I was skeptical at first. Would the associates be challenged getting on? All they have is a name badge, as well as obviously the guests just with the room key. But the feedback from both guests and associates has been outstanding. The drivers have excellent hosts. We challenge our associates to make sure we always represent the area well. But I think it's been a great interaction as well with the drivers because again they come on. Don't get challenged. Both guests and associates get to where they need to get to, can ask questions. It's been a great partnership so far. So I know Russ went into great detail, but I also would be happy to answer any questions you have. But so far we're excited and we'll continue to monitor it and see how it goes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Maraglia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mandy,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is that it?
We have thousands of employees currently using the service and have had an overwhelming interest and response to our CPAS program. With over 30 potential partners in the works currently, including hotels, restaurants, small businesses, and powerhouse instrumental corporations located throughout Pinellas County. I have set at each of your seats a black folder containing some CPAS information. If you guys have any business or corporate entity or hotel that you feel might be interested in partnering with PSTA, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to be accommodating as far as an appointment setting schedule goes. So please reach out to me. We look forward to the potential and the growth and the continued success of our CPAS program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mandy. All right, and next up are our committee updates. So let's hear from Ms. Gloria Leapick-Corrigan, please. Come forward. Goodbye. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Let me get, oh, good, thank you. Good, okay. Good morning, Chairman Long, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The Transit Riders Advisory Committee, the TRAC, met on January 16th of 2018, and we welcomed 7 new members to our committee. So we have a full group now. And in our introductions, we continued to hear about how enthusiastic everyone is about being involved in helping to shape the continued growth and improvement of PSTA, the system that we gratefully use. Much of the meeting was focused on familiarizing and refamiliarizing our members with the objectives and structure of TRAC, and the agenda included an orientation overview, staff introductions, and a presentation by Nicole Nate of the TRAC bylaws, meeting etiquette and efficiencies, and the Florida Sunshine Law. The final item on our agenda was a discussion of our 2018 initiatives, or initial discussion about that. We looked at ideas to focus on internal issues that are controlled within PSTA and external issues that may involve partner agencies and communities within which we operate. One of the most exciting things we discussed was an apparent success that we had related to our 2017 safety initiative. Our impact was demonstrated in projects such as the remodel at Woodland Square Shopping Center in Oldsmar. A new pedestrian path was added where none had previously existed. And a conversation with the developer, that's right, revealed that the action was taken because the city had asked them to do it. which is really important, I think, to remember that when cities ask, developers also will do what they are asked to do. Local government matters. And thank you again for your support and interest in the views and needs of PSTA riders. Awareness of pedestrian and bus rider safety issues make a difference. The next track meeting will be held on February 20th, and as always, we invite you to attend or watch the video of the meeting at a later time. Thank you very much.
And thank you for all of your efforts on this
Thank you.
committee that you're serving on. Thank you very much. I'm sorry?
I said thank you.
Oh. Mr. Johnson, would you like to give the update, please, on Forward Pinellas?
Thank you. Because the Forward Pinellas report includes both meetings on December 13th and January 10th, I chose to distribute a copy of this summary to you at the dais rather than reading the whole thing, but I would hit some highlights. And on December 13th, the board talked about a request that came initially from Councilmember Kennedy in response to a Florida DOT request that we start looking at the local commitment for the project that comes out of the regional transit feasibility plan. We want some ideas as to how that would be locally matched. And so our executive director has been meeting with the Pinellas County Administrator to start that preliminary discussion. A second thing that was presented on December 13th was the State Road 60 multimodal implementation plan. This is the road that goes through Clearwater on Gulf to Bay. And the plan has a lot of potential suggestions for complete streets as well as premium bus along there. And that plan actually will be presented to the City Council this afternoon. The December 13th meeting also had a presentation of finding the missing middle of housing in Pinellas County. Forward Pinellas has a program, a knowledge exchange series, where they look once, 2 or 3 times a year at an issue affecting the area. That's an excellent document, and I would suggest your review of that. On January 10th, there was a presentation on the spring break services going to Clearwater Beach, as well as some of the other projects potentially coming forward relating to Clearwater Beach. And also on the 10th, Ray Charmonte, the TBARTA Executive Director, made a presentation on the regional MPO coordination, structural research, and best practices. This was initiated back when the Obama administration was actually mandating the merger of MPOs and how that could be done in a reasonable manner. Although that mandate has been rescinded, the study is still going to go forward to see if there's some things that we can learn from it. And the other thing that I attached was a copy of the TMA summary because it was a major meeting on the 19th of January, and the main discussion item was the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, which has also been presented to TBARTA and has had quite a bit of coverage in the newspaper. So with that, Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions if anyone has them.
All right, seeing no questions, we will move forward to, hold on. There we go. We will move forward to the TBARTA update, and I am your representative on that agency, and so we have done a lot since the last time we met here at PSTA. You may remember that we were required by statute to produce a transit feasibility study, and that was released through the TMA a week or so ago and was also presented to TBARTA this last Friday. As a result of that feasibility study being brought forward, we did pass a resolution to move it into the public engagement phase of moving transportation forward in this region. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that study as we go forward. And I'm also very pleased to share that we approved a resolution supporting our Central Avenue BRT project as an important first beginning to create the visionary spine that has been created. Along with that, we are moving forward. I also am on the policy committee, which Chair Holton wants all of our major issues to come through, to be vetted before they come to the full board. And so we are moving forward very quickly to put in place the process for hiring a new executive director. We're working on refining a job description, a timeline, and determining a search firm that can help us, and we'll be bringing that back to the full board at our next meeting. I also am really excited to share that we have received a commitment as of last Friday that Senator Galvano has put our $1 million appropriation into the Senate budget with a commitment between him and Speaker Corcoran to ensure that those dollars come forward. And that also is a great beginning for our whole region to ensure sustainable funding going forward. Just give me 1 second to make sure I haven't missed anything. At our January 26th meeting, we also approved our vision, our goals, and our principles and action plan going forward. And that took some time during our workshop to develop. So all of that is on the website at tbarta.com. We also received Phase 1 results from the MPO Regional Coordination Structure Research, which Commissioner Johnson has already spoke about. And we did vote on accepting the Florida Department of Transportation's request that TBARTA take the lead in funding and implementation and in future projects going forward in the region. So we're excited about that as well. And that is the end of my report on TBARTA. And so now I would like to ask us to move to the consent agenda, and I believe we have 2 items to be pulled. Brad?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. I would like to request that we pull consent items B, 5.B, which is the security guard services contract, and 5.G, the Voices of the Customer Survey contract, so we can have a brief clarifying discussion about these contracts before they're voted on.
All right. And may I have a motion to approve? Thank you, Mr. Banter.
I'm sorry, what was the motion to approve?
To approve the rest of the consent.
Second.
Second by Bill Johnson. Please all cast your votes. Madam Clerk, please open the voting system. All right. And I believe that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And
I'm a yes. I don't know. It didn't show up on my.
oh, sorry, Commissioner.
You're up there.
You're up there.
I didn't hit anything. It didn't show up. Oh, you did it. Okay. Thank you.
Oh.
All right, and now we're back on 5B and 5G. Mr. Zimmett, would you like to clarify?
Madam Chair, I would like to call on Al Burns, PSTA's Procurement Director, to explain the issue with these 2 items that I would describe as a clarification that our legal counsel suggested for each of these 2 multi-year contracts. Al?
Good morning, Brad. Good morning, Madam Chair, PSTA Board.
Morning.
Al Burns, Director of Procurement. In your packet, on your devices, you will see the revised red line versions of the staff summaries for these 2 5-year contracts. The first one, 5B, is for our security guard services at our transit centers, and the second one, 5G, is for customer survey services. On Friday, our legal counsel asked that we rewrite them different than what the Finance Committee saw and recommended a week ago. You can see by the red line versions that the motions now specifically note that the board approvals are for the 5-year maximum period of each contract and that the board is authorizing the PSTA CEO to exercise the option for years 4 and 5 on each contract. The contracts themselves did not change at all. It was just that our council thought the board actions should specify the 5-year terms and authority for the CEO to exercise the options years as needed. Understand that several years ago, the PSTA board requested that contracts be authorized in this manner, and this has been the practice for a while now. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Zimmett, do you have any further comments?
I think Mr. Burns explained it well. I just think it was important to have the board know and specifically authorize the CEO to exercise the options in years 4 and 5 under the same terms and conditions that you're approving.
All right. And before we take our votes, or I hear a motion, Mr. Rask is asked to speak to this item. Remember, Mr. Rask, it's a technical change.
Yeah, I understand, and I'll be brief. Just as a point of order for the citizens, it'd be great if you took a motion in a second so we can comment on the motion that's on the floor. Mr. Johnson had mentioned in a committee meeting that he had observed up at the Clearwater bus station that the security guard was just sitting, perhaps in a booth, not walking around, engaging people. I myself made a public records request when you had a sheriff's deputy here a year ago who was supposed to provide security, yet was sitting behind the desk on his phone the whole time. When I requested the security video, I was told that there's a court case that says that video is exempt. I kind of question that, given if you look at, for instance, there's booking video of the Seminole Heights murderer being booked at Hillsborough County Jail. So I kind of question whether that video is exempt, but the bigger issue, the important issue I want to make, the important point I want to make is, with this contract, make sure the security guards are doing what you want them to do. I don't want my tax dollars to go to have some sheriff's deputy sit behind a counter and play on his phone, looking down the whole time, not observing if something's going on. So that's the point I wanted to make with the security contract. And I did watch the committee meeting, and I want to thank Mr. Burns for all the work he's done on this contract.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. Very good point and duly noted by everyone. Thank you. All right, and now I will entertain a motion, please, for the 5B and 5G amendments.
So moved.
Second. It has been moved by Mr. Barkley and seconded by Commissioner Gerard. Would the clerk please open the voting system? All right, and that motion is approved unanimously. Pardon? Okay. And now we are on our action items today. It's an important step for approving our overall transit system throughout the county. And Heather Sobush, I believe, PSTA's planning director, is going to present the scope of our upcoming community bus planning effort. And I am pleased to learn we'll be saving money by completing the plan in conjunction with Forward Pinellas's long-range transportation plan update. Good morning, Heather.
Yes, that is correct.
Oh, hold on one moment, please.
Yeah, just real quick, you had said you were going to pull a second item. Did you?
Yes.
Did you do that in that?
Yes.
Together, I apologize for missing.
That's okay, no problem. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. So yes, this is an action item to approve an update to the community bus plan that was last done in 2012, 2013. It is a task work order approval for up to $550,000 with our general services consultant, WSP. And again, you're correct that we will save money over what it cost us last time, which was approximately $700,000, because we are able to build off that previous plan, and then also because we're partnering with the MPO and FDOT on the public outreach components. A little background, the 2013 bus plan was the last comprehensive operational analysis we had done in about 20 years. It included a full onboard survey, which is something we try to do every 5 years, and then it also included no new revenue and new revenue scenarios with major recommendations requiring a new revenue source. In the absence of that new revenue source, we embarked on a multi-phase system redesign. This included the grid network in downtown St. Pete, the elimination of some underperforming routes, streamlining routes where possible, and then also incrementally adding service as we realize savings from other efforts. We also have begun implementing a number of pilot innovative projects to provide alternatives in areas where fixed route transit service doesn't perform as well. There's been some environmental factors that have affected transit ridership also since 2013. Nationwide, we've seen declining transit ridership, and then agencies implementing new approaches to try to counteract that. And then we've also seen some unpredictability of future federal funding, particularly for major capital projects. Here in Pinellas, some positives. We've had more population growth than expected. We've also seen our local jurisdictions implementing new land use policies that allow greater intensity and density along major transit corridors and also in downtown areas. And then we've seen a lot more collaboration between the MPO, DOT, PSTA, and local jurisdictions to implement all modes within corridors. It's also a good time to update this plan based on the larger planning framework. The recommendations coming out of this plan will go directly into our TDP and then also into the 2045 long-range transportation plan. The scope of the bus plan includes a full onboard survey in March. This allows us to capture our traditional transit riders, but also our seasonal riders. It includes comprehensive data analysis, case studies on system redesigns and outcomes, a white paper of innovation best practices, and then multiple scenarios and funding recommendations. The schedule includes the survey in March and then recommendations coming out excuse me, in the fall. So again, this is a action item to approve this task work order with WSP. And now I'll turn it over to the planning chair since they did approve this unanimously.
Commissioner Gerard?
We did approve this unanimously.
I think you stole her thunder, Heather. All right, are there any questions? Oh, Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, could you just explain how this community bus plan informs or overlaps with the ongoing regional transit feasibility update planning?
Yes. Well, the recommendations coming out of this, there will be likely some regional recommendations. Those would feed directly into those larger planning efforts like TBARDA's and then also what the TMA is doing. Also, the background bus network is, of course, critical to provide service locally and then also feeding into those regional services. So this will allow us to look at how do we connect into the regional services.
Okay, I have another question.
Okay.
And then another kind of foundational / philosophical question our board has addressed in the past is the coverage issues of whether we're going to do core services or different type of coverage. And could you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, we'll look at those scenarios. So the scenarios include kind of carrying forward what we're doing today. And then also one of the scenarios we'll look at how do we potentially increase our kind of innovative services, our first and last mile services, and then reinvest as much resources as possible into our core network. And then finally, the last scenario would be kind of a vision or optimal scenario looking at what we would do if funding was not an issue, if we had unlimited funding, and what that network would look like.
I guess where I'm kind of going with that too is the core versus coverage scenarios. I believe our board last time expressed a preference for recognizing the importance of equity and covering as many places in the county as we could. And when the board sets coverage as a goal for the transit agency, that means we maybe are sacrificing ridership to a small extent. So while we may sometimes get criticized or questioned on ridership issues, our board has set the goal for coverage. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I think sometimes we're unfairly criticized for something when the whole goal of the agency is to keep in mind equity and covering as many places as we can, and then utilizing innovative relationships with rideshare companies to try to finish that first mile, last mile on some of the clunker routes. But,
Yes, that's correct.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just kind of continuing on that question, I think that there is a future need for more transit in our concentrated center areas. However, that we don't have any more resources, so it's redeploying those resources. But in redeploying those resources, it also ties in with the land use plans. And so the question is, will this be coordinated with Forward Pinellas and our cities to look at what their land use plan changes might be and how that affects the future?
Yes, absolutely. We already work closely with the local jurisdictions and Fort Pinellas, and we recognize all of the efforts, both kind of with the PPC side of Fort Pinellas and then a lot of the local jurisdictions to allow for that extra intensity and density along major transit corridors. So we've seen that obviously in Clearwater with the US 19 redevelopment plan, and most of the downtown plans recognize the need for transit and provide those as the intensity and density as incentives to build mixed-use developments in those areas that have good transit service.
And Madam Chair, if I may, the other issue that's come up, I think, since the original community bus plan was done is the access to transit study, which didn't really come up with any definitive recommendations, but said coordinate, communicate. And will this study look at some of those burdens to transit access? You mentioned US 19, how that would work.
I wouldn't say it's going to have a comprehensive focus on transit access. However, I've participated in a lot of these other studies. We will look at all of those other recommendations, and I think there'll be more of a focus moving forward based on my conversations, met with Largo and Oldsmar last week and Forward Pinellas, on making sure that those connections are made. And as we redevelop our corridors, the FDOT corridor studies, all these complete streets projects that are occurring right now are all looking at how do we, not only allow for cars in the corridor, but allow transit, and then of course the access, the bicycle and pedestrian access. And so trying to implement all of those together within the corridor. And for example, in Largo, when I met with them last week, we talked about Missouri, and we talked about, can we develop kind of some specific plans and recommendations as we do redevelop that corridor, wherein we'd have good crossings, maybe look at where our bus stops are and moving those closer to intersections, those kind of things. So yes, I think as we move forward, any recommendation coming out of this plan will be coupled with what's happening at the local level.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. And now I would like to move to public comment. Seeing no further question, Mr. Rask.
Again, Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. I assume the motion will be to approve. I think that the this item's been a little bit misrepresented. Ms. Soba said something to the effect that we've had a positive development, that population growth has been a positive development. Why is that a positive development? Who voted for that? Did we voters vote for that? I'm not aware of that. Creating congestion, because that's what it does when you don't increase the number of lane miles. That's not a positive development. In looking at any community bus plan, it would be reasonable to look at the previous community bus plan, which had 3 goals. Build a transit constituency. Well, they failed at that goal. Improve transit competitiveness. Another fail. Build financial sustainability. I think that's also going to be a fail, as you see with federal funds drying up. Also, that was on page 4 of the January 2014 report on the community bus plan. And on page 91, they talked about the no new revenue scenario, which called about a preservation of the core network. PSTA itself and its board promised to cut services by about 30% if Greenlight Pinellas failed. It did fail. It lost 62% to 38%. To talk about that we're saving money when you're saving $50,000 in an upwards $100 million budget is somewhat insulting to the taxpayers. You have almost $100 million here you can deploy in various ways to give the truly needy and the poor mobility, and you're deploying it in a poor way. Again, the ridership is, this year, you're headed towards a 22% decline of ridership compared to 3 years ago. And you want to do another bus plan for $550,000? So neither the goals were not achieved from 5 years ago, the recommendations were not heeded, and you're going to spend $550,000 with WSP, formerly Parsons Brinckerhoff. Now, Parsons Brinckerhoff is the same company that helped to totally corrupt the Go Hillsborough process by picking political operative Beth Latham to facilitate the community engagement process back then. You all know how that went. Go Hillsborough failed to even make the ballot because it became so compromised. As far as the first mile, last mile program, that program is hardly used. And I've written to you about that before. You can pull the numbers yourself. The Uber connection is hardly used. And I would argue that when it's used, it's probably abused. And I've laid that out for you in a previous email. I don't know what a citizen has to do. Do you have to go out and abuse it and show you that it can be abused? There is nothing to ensure that a person actually uses transit that uses that program. So I'm going to wrap up by saying, don't do another community bus plan, especially not with Parsons Brinckerhoff. Instead, heed the recommendations from the one 5 years ago. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further questions on this item, commissioners? No? Then I would ask for a motion to move forward, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Gerard, second by Commissioner Rice. All those, please open the voting system. Samantha, did you vote?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, there we go. All right, and we will move to item 6B. Jacob Labuka.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. I am very pleased to present this action item that was unanimously approved at the January 18th Planning Committee to approve up to $150,000 in matching funds for two very exciting grant opportunities related to beginning a program for shared use autonomous vehicles here at PSTA. Over the last few months, we've been approached by several engineering firms who have offered their services as a grant. They are very interested in getting in early on the deployment of AV technologies as this really gets into the market of throughout the transportation industry, whether it's rideshare or freight and now public transportation. And PSTA has developed a reputation for being an innovator in the transit industry through implementation of programs such as Direct Connect, Late Shift, Sandbox. And we are a natural partner for these companies because we have a proven track record of not only planning these innovative programs, but also implementing them. And the matching funds for these grants will come from the savings experienced from the recent consolidated bus purchase. The first opportunity I would like to talk to you about is a demonstration, actually getting an AV vehicle out onto the streets, introducing the technology to the community, and also collecting important and meaningful data for the continuation of an AV program here in Pinellas County. So this demonstration would be in downtown St. Petersburg, and we would be partnering with the engineering firm AECOM, who has already been working with us to draft a potential operating plan. They would also continue to help us in the city identify infrastructure needs and other AV-related services. And the matching funds required for this would be up to $100,000, and this is an all-inclusive estimate for a 3-month demonstration. And we actually have a meeting scheduled with the planner from AECOM next week to hit the ground running. And this could potentially launch as early as this spring. The second opportunity I would like to talk to you about is a feasibility study. This will be conducted by the engineering firm Stantec, which is the operator of the Gomentum Ranch in California, which is the largest AV test track in the nation. This would take another look at what it would take for AVs to operate in mixed traffic and what it would take to, what permanent infrastructure and other related facilities would need to be changed and implemented in order to have a AV service operate in Pinellas County. And the focus of this study would be on some of our northern Pinellas County environments, such as Clearwater, Dunedin, and Tarpon Springs. And I actually had the great pleasure of taking a transit planner from Stantec on a tour of all the wonderful places in northern Pinellas County as she sought refuge from the cold in British Columbia. And the matching funds required for this would be approximately $50,000, which would be a 50-50 split with Stantec. And with that, the recommendation is to approve the matching funds for both the AV demonstration and the feasibility study grant opportunities, not to exceed $150,000. Before I take any questions, I would like to give the floor to Commissioner Gerard for any comments that she might have.
Commissioner Gerard.
Hi. I think you've done a wonderful job of presenting this.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. We passed it unanimously. Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Rice.
And a clarification for the AECOM project in St. Pete. It's from the Vinoy to?
Right now, the concept is potentially to run between the Vinoy and the Dali, but we'll continue to talk with the city to finalize an operating plan and alignment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm glad that somebody has putting some skin in the game, so to speak. I'm not sure what their skin in the game is, other than probably the salary. I would like to see them do the whole thing. I don't know why we have to do it ourselves. I think it'd probably be a good thing for private industry to do. What I'd asked Brad for also was perhaps you could give us an update on what's been going on in this arena over in Tampa, and see how they're doing and what progress is or what issues they've had, running into this kind of testing.
From my understanding with the project that Hart planned, they have had an issue with their vehicle manufacturer, so I believe there is sort of permanent delay on the project for now. But from my understanding of the main issue is the vehicle manufacturer, but I believe they're still going ahead and testing their connected vehicle technologies downtown, if I'm not mistaken.
And the ultimate goal of this testing is what?
I believe it's both introducing this community to the public, but also getting data collection about how it operates and other things like that we could use for furthering our AV program here.
All right. Commissioner Barkley.
Thank you, Jacob. Could you give us a little bit of information, please, on the vehicles on slide 5, and also what kind of capacity we anticipate on this? Is there how do the vehicles operate? Do they use a track in the ground, or do they have some other type of GPS type technology?
Certainly. So to speak to the vehicles, on the bottom, the left is the EZ10 shuttle created by EasyMile. That has a capacity of about 12 for 6 standing and 6 seating. It can also accommodate wheelchairs as shown by the ramp. And the vehicle on the right is from a company called Navia. That can, I believe, hold a maximum of 15. And I believe that picture is from the demonstration in Las Vegas. And then in terms of, I'm sorry, what was part 2?
How they operate? Do they use GPS technology? Or
I think there's of course, there's GPS and a variety of infrastructure. There's no track that's required. Essentially, what they do is the vehicle manufacturer would come out and do a sort of electronic site analysis. So they essentially look at the fixed environment, look at what's a permanent part of the environment, and their software detects any anomalies in the fixed environment, so such as pedestrians, bicycles, vehicles. So it's designed to be able to assess those differences and respond to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question that I don't recall from our discussion, the source of the funds that PSTA funds that are used for this, is that in our budget, and where is that in our budget?
Well, I believe that's just the, from my understanding, we purchased buses for fiscal year 18 and 19 together rather than purchasing them in separate years, and this money is from the savings from purchasing those together.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Eggers brought up a good point. Do we know what their financial investment in the project is?
Let's see, interim for, we do know a clear number for Stantec. AECOM, we haven't done an official evaluation of their in-kind consulting services.
And then we're doing a feasibility study for North County. Was there one done for the St. Pete route, or are they just going
No,
with the
this one's more just a demonstration just to introduce it. But I believe the feasibility study would be for a more long-term permanent program.
And these vehicles belong to the company and are retained by them?
Yeah, well, we would be leasing the vehicles.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Jacob. Very exciting stuff here. I'm not sure if this question is really more for Jacob or maybe more for Brad, but it says that several engineering firms have approached PSTA. Did we need to do an RFP on this? Is this outside the scope of our purchasing for them, or how does that work?
We have reviewed the proposals that we've received by both Stantec and AECOM with our procurement rules, and we don't believe so, since we're treating these as grants from both these companies. Again, the estimated value that Stantec has proposed to us is about $50,000 that they are going to provide in developing their feasibility study for Northern Pinellas County, and then AECOM is essentially providing 100% of their in-kind services to develop the same kind of study, and then the $100,000 that we allocate to match that program would be to lease those vehicles to do the 3-month demonstration program. So essentially, since we're matching both options of folks that have approached us, we're okay with procurement. If we were going to go with a long-term lease or if the implementation program is successful, then we would do an RFP, and a selection process.
So this is really more for testing purposes and development, and then there would be an RFP to follow after that?
Yeah.
If it was, okay.
Yeah.
And then one quick follow-up question on that. With these, who's, on the liability side, are we covered with that? I mean, if there's something that happened in programming or whatever with these vehicles, are we covered on that side of it? Have we evaluated that aspect of it?
That's a great question, and one that we have posed to both providers, and one that we've expressed, that needs to be addressed by the firms. It does seem to me like this technology obviously is moving very rapidly and changing, and the way it is sort of, at least in these early days, being organized is these large engineering firms are taking the lead and then partnering with vehicle manufacturers and in some case third-party operators to provide that liability coverage. Like the one pilot in Las Vegas has Keolis, a management company, providing the oversight and liability coverage on that pilot. So that may turn out to be how our pilot works as well. At this point, we have that same question, and we have asked both design teams to respond how that will be taken care of.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Gerard.
I just have a question about the North County one. That does not include a demonstration of any kind. It's just feasibility and sort of identifying appropriate places to do something in the future and whether we have the infrastructure.
Correct, at least at this time, that's how it was set up, is to just develop a study to identify a location and what would be, what changes or how a program might work without a demonstration. Although when Jacob and I met with Stantec last week, they, I think, were maybe feeling a little competitive with their competitor, AECOM, and offered if we would like to do a similar test demonstration and rearrange their contract. We'll just have to see. You know, we looked more specifically at Clearwater Beach, Dunedin, and Tarpon Springs, because the maximum speed on these vehicles so far is pretty slow. So it would have to. I don't think it could operate like on US 19 at this stage. So we looked at those 3 slower speed areas. There's some pretty complex issues with all 3 of them. So whether or not a pilot emerges, we'll have to see. I mean, I think they would like to do a pilot. We'll just have to see what the sort of analysis bears before doing that. And then we would come back to the PSTA board if we would like, if we want to make a pilot in northern Pinellas.
All right. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, it just seems like the more questions that are asked, that it just raises more questions. I don't know why we can't, perhaps be a little bit more proactive with this. And I think by doing a procurement process, you actually do that. You get the questions on liability, you get the questions on that competitiveness that you talked about, Brad, being addressed. And so I don't know why we just don't pause a little bit and get some of these engineering firms. So I think this is great exposure for them. I think that if this actually was a competitive process, you might be surprised at the things that we might find in this. And so I would really like to just kind of say, let's slow down a little bit and do a procurement process and get things answered up front and do it the right way. So I would recommend denial.
All right. Commissioner Rice.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, going back to the issues that came about with the Tampa Heart Project, how can we be assured by AECOM and Stantec that the same problems could be avoided?
Well, I think for us, it's about making sure we know from the beginning who they intend for a vehicle manufacturer and actually meeting with them from the very beginning in the planning and implementation of this program.
Because I believe one of the issues in Tampa is they selected a company that hadn't actually even manufactured an AV vehicle.
Yes, and I believe the companies we've talked to, such as EasyMile and Navia, both have proven track record with both manufacturing the vehicles and also successful demonstration projects as well.
My second question is, I think maybe this is common sense, but I just want to be sure, because I know a lot of us here that work on transportation issues have been talking about automated vehicle technology for quite some time, but some of the public, it's still a new subject. Mm-hmm. So these pilot vehicles would still have an operator on board.
Yes.
So this is not driverless. This is automated vehicle. There's still, hello, Cassandra.
Hello.
There's still an operator on board.
Yes, there would definitely be an operator on board for this demonstration.
There actually is no operator on board.
Well,
There is, so what happens with these vehicles, these are driverless vehicles. There are other autonomous features that we can add into our vehicles with an operator. And you all have seen cars that have autonomous vehicle elements. Yeah. These are driverless vehicles. So what happens is every morning there is someone, not necessarily an operator, that goes out and drives the course. And this is using LiDAR technologies, which takes a look at what Jacob was saying about shadows and interaction with other vehicles and things within the environment. And then the vehicle then maps that route for the day. When things change, like there's a festival, like let's say we chose Dunedin and then there's a festival, you can change the route that morning. You do not need an operator on board at that time. Now, because this technology is new and people are not used to it, you usually have an observer on board. So that person is not driving it, but is there in case of an emergency. And so I want to make that distinction that this is not necessarily an operator, it is an observer. There are lots of vehicle technologies across the country that are currently using that system. A lot of your big city train systems use observers and not necessarily drivers.
Thank you, Cassandra, for that very articulate explanation. Commissioner Rice, are you finished with your?
I am, thanks.
All right. No one else? All right. Thank you both very much. Mr. Rask, I believe you have some comments to make, correct? Please come forward.
Again, Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. On the third slide, it said that AECOM has been providing in-kind consulting services. I marked my card undecided because I wanted to know more about this. Has been. So they're currently doing it or have done it in the past. That seems a little problematic. That sounds like a great way to get a foot in the door and then convince PSTA to fund half their demonstration project, which is along the lines of the concern that Mr. Eggers has. I don't see a role for the public sector in this. Ms. Rice mentioned that there have been people who have been talking about AV vehicles for a long time. Some have been talking about it longer than others. This is one of the things that us critics of Greenlight Pinellas said in 2014, that we're living through a transportation revolution. Autonomous vehicles, driverless vehicles, whatever you want to call them, are going to change things. And here we are. So here you're talking about doing a grant. Again, referring back to my comments under public comments, the first thing you should grant is an award, not to me, but to people like Barb Hazelden and Sharon Calvert and others who've uniformly been correct on these issues. I'm in favor of looking at AV for public transportation, but this contract seems a little bit problematic. Also, this board previously approved electric buses. Will you be able to retrofit those buses as being AV buses? That purchase is looking more and more questionable at this time, given how things are developing. And the fact remains that traditional transit ridership, which is what you provide now, is dropping like a rock. Nothing's going to change it. And the last thing the public needs now is a contract that's going to cloud or shade any AV efforts you have. It really troubles me that it says that that AECOM has been providing in-kind services. AECOM is a great company. They're much better than those corrupt entities like Jacobs Engineering and WSP, formerly Parsons Brinkerhoff. AECOM was the company that in a study in, I believe, 2015 in May, said that Go Hillsborough could not get funding for rail. And the Hillsborough County administrator promptly buried that study. But they wrote that they will not receive funding for rail. They even underlined it. So I'm for AECOM, I'm for AV, I'm not in favor of this contract. It should go to RFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. Commissioner Gerard, did you have any further comments from the PSTA's Planning Committee meeting?
No, I didn't. Other than that, we passed it unanimously.
Okay. And now we are in a position to move forward. May I have a motion to move this issue forward, please?
Also move. I had made a motion not to move it forward. I guess there was no second, so I just want to make sure that that was out there.
Please let the record reflect that Commissioner Eggers made a motion to deny. Commissioner Barkley has made a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rice. Will the clerk please open the voting system?
This is the wrong,
We need to change the.
Commissioner Eggers did not move.
yeah.
So,
Why don't we just clarify, the motion
Well,
is to approve the staff recommendation. I think there's some confusion, I just want to make sure that everybody understood that
well,
that's.
yes, and so, Madam Clerk, we have a majority for moving it forward, correct? Okay. That abstain box is a little troubling to me. It's
Yeah.
yes, no, and abstain?
Right. So
I'd just like to clarify that the voting tab indicated that Commissioner Eggers made that motion, and that's not correct. It was, I made that.
Right, she has that recorded.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to clarify that everybody understood they were voting on your motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Right.
Yeah, I think on mine, it also had Commissioner Rice as the seconder, and that didn't happen either, so I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, we good? All right. Okay. And now we are on 6C, the SEIU Supervisory Labor Agreement. Mr. Bradford, would you please come forward?
Morning, board members.
And you have Mr. Smith with you. Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right, good morning, James Bradford, Chief Operating Officer, and yes, I have the Chief of Staff for the Florida Public Services Union and our SEIU union, Rick Smith. So pleased to be here before you this morning on this topic, seeking your approval on a 3-year contract with our supervisory group, and the board approval will represent the final step in ratification. This is a 3-year approval for a union contract with SEIU Supervisory Group. And just as a reminder, this is one of 2 unions that PSTA has. The other union, which is coming up actually later this year, is our non-supervisory union, also headed by Mr. Rick Smith and SEIU. That contains nearly 480 plus collective bargaining employees, which include your bus operators, your mechanics, and your customer service representatives. This particular one that we're discussing today represents just 29 individuals, 29 supervisors. They, in both departments, 2 departments of transportation and maintenance. There are 22 transportation supervisors and about 7 maintenance supervisors. We actually reached full tentative agreement last November 15th, 2017. SEIU has already done their part in ratifying their portion of this agreement at a vote of 19-6. And of course, and we're always pleased to announce the new 3-year contract is projected to be within PSTA's budget over those 3 years. Just point your attention to the bottom of this slide here. You'll see a little bit of a graphic there. That larger piece of the pie represents the 480 individuals, the bus operators, the mechanics, and that non-supervisory group. You see that little sliver up there of 29, and the reason I point to it is just a segue to my next slide. But those 29 individuals really are the ones that supervise and manage that group of nearly 500 people. And one of the things that we're pleased to do, and this is the third agreement or my tenure, and Rick Smith and partnering with SEIU, it's absolutely amazing, and just pleased to actually be a mutual agreement again. But one of the things we try to do with the supervisors is empower them. The supervisors are empowered to go above and beyond to provide the customer service, the excellent customer service that we want to see. Anything where the customer service reps or the bus operators' hands are tied, they are empowered to go out there to make sure that every rider gets a trip home. If you've missed the bus at the end of the day, if buses are running back to back due to traffic, redirect the buses, do whatever you need to do. But these 29 individuals are very important to our operation. They oversee everything A to Z in our day-to-day operations. As you can see up here, their shifts are 24 hours, 7 days a week. They span around the clock. These include duties like dispatch and scheduling, radio controls and road supervision, of course, mechanical repairs and vehicle servicing, building and asset management. I mean, lights are going out, temperature controls, making sure this building is still standing, landscaping, you name it. These are supervisors overseeing this work. Of course, accident response during the unfortunate times, and it happens, we're out there in the buses, nearly 180 at peak times, where we get into fender benders. Supervisors are the ones that go out there. Make sure people get medical assistance if they need it. The buses, if they need to be towed back, even though that's seldom. Any spill kits that are needed, make sure they work with local law enforcement to take care of accident scenes, take pictures. That's our supervisors. Emergency response, certainly, this is the group that steps up. Hurricane Irma, when that unfortunately hit us, it was our supervisors that were here around the clock, working with local law enforcement, staying at the EOC if needed, making sure that we made our buses available to have a mass evacuation, but also to move our buses to higher ground. Those were the supervisors taking part in that. So when we got down to it, not a whole lot of issues to discuss, as it oftentimes does in union negotiations. Comes down to wages and working conditions. One of our goals is to make sure that with all the duties and responsibilities that this small group has, that their pay is commensurate and represents some of the duties and responsibilities that they have. Now, of course, PSTA's goal when we go into negotiations is to stay within our budget, to stay manageable. SEIU's goal, of course, is to look at where their wages are going to go, their annual increases. But one thing, and then when Rick came in, they said, you know what? This year we're looking at pay parity. And I kind of, was, okay, wow, because usually unions look at seniority. Seniority is king. You look at the folks who've been here the longest make more money, and then the folks who are just coming in, sometimes in union language you say the unborn, the folks who haven't even started working yet are coming in at a lower rate, but not this time. They wanted to look at pay parity. And if you look at that graphic, and let me just show you what you're looking at, look on the right side of the screen. The very top two rows, I think there's green and maybe that's an orange color. That represents the maintenance groups. And the last four, the purple, the beige, the tan, the blue, that's transportation. I have in that box the number of years for each one of those groups. And the reason I bring that up is you'll notice the 0 to 5 year group in transportation and maintenance represents nearly 50% of that group. And of course, here's a group that's coming in and saying, look, we're doing the same jobs, the same duties. We would like to kind of seek more of a pay parity. So we weren't going to accomplish that all in this contract, but what we did was we compressed. We did our best to compress those rates. Some of the senior folks took less of a % increase than some of the junior folks, and that's where we are today. Also, if you're looking to your left over that current column, or what our supervisors are currently making, 2017 column pretty much represents the increases they should have received October 1st, 2017, had we been fully complete with the negotiations. And then 2018, 2019, those represent increases on October 1st of that year. So that's how that goes. So again, a shared goal in terms of looking at wages that are commensurate, and us staying in budget, PSTA, SEIU looking at that pay parity. There is a bigger increase in year 1, then years 2 and 3. It's a 2% increase, which brings PSTA within their budget. Some information, this did go before the Finance Committee where it was approved. Had some additional information by Commissioner Eggers. In that last slide where you saw the wages, and also this slide, a wage comparison among agencies. So that's in the slides, but there's also in your packets as well that you'll find that information. Just take a look at wage comparisons among the agencies. You can see in red, it says PSTA proposed, PSTA current. We are right in the mix with our Central Florida brethren. If you look at Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville, we're right there. We're right there where we want to be. Now, of course, you see some of these maximum rates, and they get up there. They get up there in Miami, Palm Beach, Palm Tran. And again, what you're looking at is years and years of unions with these folks, where those wages are going up each year, and for a long time, seniority driving that. But we're keeping pace. Now, the one thing I think we do well, if you notice, when you're a supervisor here, you start at a little bit of a higher rate. We do a lot better than a lot of those other places. And one of the reasons for that is we do believe with those 29 individuals managing these nearly 500 people, that it does make sense when you're a former bus operator, former mechanic, and you've been promoted up to supervisor, that you're making more than the folks that you're supervising. and that margin is about 5%. The reason I bring that up is you're going to notice some of the lower starting rates there. Not every agency in Florida does this. However, their pay structure is, and we looked into it a little bit, it is possible in some of these other agencies to be a starting supervisor and make lower than the maximum rate for a bus operator or mechanic. But not here. Again, there's at least about 5% cushion. So one of the reasons for us, again, a few of the agencies work like that, but there are some agencies that we discovered do have a lower starting supervisor rate than the upper bus operator or mechanic rate. So again, to conclude, and Rick's going to say a few words, but again, just seeking your approval on a 3-year agreement with the SEIU Supervisory Union. I have some contract highlights that I did go through in some great detail with the finance for you to see there, and I already talked about the annual wage increases. You see other things like vacation flexibility, which really just gives a little bit more of freedom to supervisors on how they use their vacation and how much notice and what the minimum increments are. You might see retro bonus check at the very bottom there in the blue, and pretty much what that means is after a while, and Rick may agree with this, retro pay can kind of become a bargaining chip after a while if negotiations keep going on. We did this in about 5 or 6 sessions. So retro bonus check, which supervisors would be looking forward to upon your approval, means they would get that pay hike, but it would be retro back to October 1st, 2017. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on that, page 3.
Hold on, can you please press your,
Sorry about that.
all right?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
No problem, I just want to make sure everyone hears you.
Yeah, on page 3, they had the 6 different categories, 3 for the well, I guess it was, 2 for maintenance, and do you know what the mix is among the 29 folks that we have in these areas, like from 0 to 4 years? You said something about over 50%, but.
Yes, yeah, and actually it's the number pertains to those folks. So if the top 2 categories are 7 people, so over 5 years, there's 4 in maintenance. 0 to 5, there's 3 people. If you look in the purple, just to give you an example, it's just the exact number that's there. There's 4 people in that over 15-year category.
Each row is a person without their name.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
thank you. That clarifies.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
So we have, in the transportation area, we have a lot of folks in the 0 to 4. And the transportation, it's kind of mixed.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, that helps, appreciate it.
All right.
And then just the last couple of categories, for example, the insurance reopener.
Hold on, Mr. Bradford, Mr. Scott has a question.
Oh.
Actually, oh, wait a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm concluding, and I'm going to pass it on to Rick. I was just going to let you know the insurance reopeners, that's just a provision in the contract because, this group will do the same thing as the larger group. So it just says, we'll do things, and we'll make that language the same when the time comes. And then the pro rata vacation, it just changes the way we calculate vacation entitlement. Essentially, and both groups thought that was a win-win. So again, the agreement is within PSTA's 3-year projected budget. And again, I'd like to pass it over to Mr. Rick Smith to say a few remarks.
Just a few brief ones. Considering everything about transportation in Pinellas County, including difficulties with resourcing, it's really more important than ever to look at the situation with kind of new eyes. You're good at that. You really are. It can lead to innovation and creative approaches, not just to public policy in general, but to things that are actually the majority of your budget, right? Employee relations, safety, productivity, and compensation of staff. This is significant in the fact that in the public sector, as many of you are aware, pay is based upon basically how long you've been there, not necessarily for the job that you're doing. So this is, in our opinion, was a step towards kind of a true equal pay for equal work. And once again, the relationship with management at PSTA is always creative. In fact, I don't think either of us approaches bargaining without having some idea that we want to break new ground. And you can be proud of your management staff on that. And it makes bargaining much more intellectually and creatively challenging. And that's a real difference between traditional labor management approaches. It's like we sit down, we identify the problems, we actually look with new eyes at how to accomplish some of our goals. So kudos to the board, kudos to Brad, to James, and to the hundreds of employees who work for the agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Nice to see you. Mr. Bradford?
Yes, and with that, we'll take any other questions you may have.
All right, Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to mention that the Finance Committee did review this item, talked about it in detail, and is recommending approval.
Excellent. No one else?
Move approval?
Commissioner Rice moved approval.
Second.
And second by Commissioner Justice. Please open the voting system. All right, and that vote passed unanimously. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you, Mr. Bradford. All right, Mr. Miller, reports and correspondence. Turn on your mic. There you go.
There.
Okay.
Okay, good morning. In your packets are, of course, the regular performance reports. We have, since we didn't have a meeting in December, our meeting covered just the October report. You have two reports, actually, November and December. In December and January, we ran the second trial of lowering our monthly pass, which normally costs $70, in half to $35 in December and January. We haven't totally finished January yet, but so far the results of that, definitely for December, and it looks like January will be the same, are very positive, where at $35 a person, we are actually making more money because we're selling so many more passes at that lower cost than the $70. We originally tried this out back in June. No correlation to the fact that June was when I was riding the bus all the time, but we had it on half price there, and there too we saw so many more people buying the passes that we made up in volume what we lost in revenue to make more money. This is actually something that I'm hopeful will be successful, and maybe we want to take a look at making permanent in our fare structure. Recently, APTA has come out with a study that I'll forward to the board so you can take a look at it, where they have done a comprehensive review of some of the trends in ridership decline that they're seeing across the country, and have a number of really different ideas, explanations for why that might be happening, and then recommendations for how that might be improved, some of which Heather brought up that we're going to take a look at through our community bus plan. But one thing that report highlights is that everywhere across the country, folks are buying fewer monthly passes. It's not just at PSTA where the number of people putting out $70 or that kind of money for a monthly pass where they're only going to ride PSTA every single day to and from a job is declining across the country. There are so many different modes and different options now that weren't in the past. You just have very, very few people that are commuters every single day by public transit. And we're seeing the same thing. Our monthly pass sales are down much more than, say, our daily and cash fares are down. So we're taking a look at that, looking at some of the APTA items. We think we're already doing a number of those programs, like first mile, last mile partnerships, etc. But you can see that information in your packet. Moving now to the next item, which is
Oh, I'm so sorry. Commissioner Gerard.
On the operating statistics, there's a pretty sharp increase in complaints in the DART service. Do we know what's going on there? We were doing great for a while.
Are you looking?
It almost doubled. Complaints per 100,000 passenger trips DART. It went to 27% from 14 just in a month. And then 64% year to date.
Oh, I see, in November. If you look at the December, it's not so stark. With another month, it is up 32%. I think that is, we've taken a little look at that, what's going on there. Some of that, it might be a reporting issue, but this is under this new agreement with CareRide. We're doing a better job than we have in the past of recording complaints, and I think that might be part of it. But it's something we need to take a look at in a little more detail. The number of complaints on DART in total is much, much lower. It's a much lower number than the number on the regular bus system. So even when you nominalize it and divide it by the 100,000 riders, a very small number, a very small change in the number of complaints that we might get on DART from month to month leads to a bigger increase. Overall, our relationship with CareRide, our provider of our DART service, is very, very positive. And they do get very, very few complaints, especially compared to some of our other previous providers.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, in the spirit of, I'm sure I'm not looking at something correctly with all my questions this morning, if you could just provide me clarification. On the ridership number that's down in December, it also is the month that we cut our monthly pass in half, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the monthly pass the actual ridership from that, as it relates to the total ridership, I'm just trying to understand that correlation. Is it a large percentage of the total riders that get a pass, or is it a small number, or how does that relate? Because it seems like if it's up, we're obviously way down overall again. So how does that correlate, if you don't mind?
Thank you. That's a good question. The answer is that the monthly pass holders is a relatively low percentage of the overall 865,000 trips. Again, the number of individual monthly passes might result in a dozen or 2 dozen trips that go into that number for the passes. But overall, the number of trips, the percentage of monthly passes, even at the half price, growing number of half prices, monthly passes, is relatively low. You can look down a couple rows on that page, and there's a row called TD, discounted pass trips. It's transportation disadvantaged discounted pass trips. Those are low-income folks who are riding the bus at $11, buying an $11 monthly pass, either themselves or they are through the Pinellas County Health Department getting it at even lower cost. You can see that number, 311,000, is down from last year, but it is making up almost a third. That's the biggest group of riders riding the bus.
The rest of the riders that are just riding that aren't on that pass, do they also get a discount, or is that just on the monthly pass?
Well, there are 2 options under transportation disadvantage. You can buy the monthly pass for $11, or you can buy a 10-day or 10 ride, I can't remember, for $5. And so those 2 options exist. Very, very few people buy the $5 10-day because then they can get the whole month for $11.
Okay. So that the folks that got the $35 pass obviously weren't the TD folk because they have a cheaper option.
Right.
A lot of folks wrote it that didn't buy the pass, that are paying the full rate, or you know, that they aren't TD users, and they didn't buy a pass. Did they have the option of getting a lower rate too on a daily basis, or did you have to buy the pass to get the discount?
You had to buy the pass.
Okay.
It was just the monthly pass was on sale. Of course, a number of our passes are sold at third-party retailers like CVS and MScott sell all of our passes, and they buy those passes in advance on consignment. So the half-price deal was not available if you bought your pass, say, at CVS every month. It was only if you went to a transportation center and bought the pass from us that you got the half-price deal. So we have to take a look at that and see if, you know, people shifted from going to CVS or MScott and going to the center to get the discount. So it'll take us a little bit of time to make sure that it was a good test.
I like the testing that you're doing, the piloting you're doing. I'd like to see that expanded though, and given some advertising time, and let it just be half price. If you're a TD user, obviously that's a different category, but everybody else, half price, because the pass people, they're not that big a percentage of our riders to begin with, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I would like to see how that works with, you know, we get the word out there that we are going to be doing half price on all riders, and see how that does it. Because I really do think that's something that we need to continue exploring because of the nature of the service that we provide versus the premium service that we're talking about right now around the region. So anyway, just a thought. Thank you, Brett.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Next up is Commissioner Torga.
Yes, Brad, thank you for the presentation. Lots of numbers, interesting. It was interesting to go through and having 2 months, by the way, because we go through 1 month and we're together. And so that brought up a lot of questions for me again as I went through them and had an interesting review. And then I got to December, and I got right to the end, and I looked at the Jolly Trolley, and again down to 21%. It says here, and it was down in December, and I just wonder, is that a trend that we're seeing, that you're seeing, that we're concerned about at this point in time? But more importantly, why? Do we have any whys about that? What happened? I was sort of surprised about the decision, frankly.
Right. Thank you. We do know why, or we do have a pretty good understanding of why the Jolly Trolley is showing a pretty steep decline. It's because it's almost entirely related to the elimination of one of the Jolly Trolley services that was providing free trips between Clearwater Marine Aquarium and downtown Clearwater. I can't remember what it was called.
Dolphin Tail Adventure.
It was called the Dolphin Tail Adventure, where they had exhibits related to the movie. Anyone who had a Clearwater Marine Aquarium ticket could ride Jolly Trolley services over and back. And once they opened their parking garage, which was I think in November or October, they completely, I think as of November 1st, they completely discontinued the Jolly Trolley services. So almost all of that 21% drop is just because of that no longer serving the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. And that ridership on that had been declining quite a bit over the past year, so we've been monitoring that. The other routes along Clearwater Beach, the other Jolly Trolley routes along Clearwater Beach, and then the coastal route from the beach to Tarpon Springs are relatively flat or actually growing a little bit.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Because I saw the November, and then I saw the December even more.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I was hoping that there wasn't anything any other causation or what have you. But sometimes isn't it interesting? We look at numbers and then you hear what's behind the numbers. So if that's actually what's behind the numbers, that's a great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Twanga. Next is Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Just to follow up, the Dolphin Tail Adventure, they closed that exhibit totally in early October, in that range. So there's nobody going to that display anymore. But the question I had has to do with the discounted fare cards. Is this kind of like When I know the postage rate is going to go up next month, I buy a roll of stamps so that I save a dollar, I guess, whatever it is. You're buying the monthly passes, but they don't have to be used in the month that you buy them. You can buy them ahead, is that correct?
That's right. We offered the half-price discount at our transportation centers for just before December started, actually Black Friday after Thanksgiving until January 31st. They are $35 for sale. You can buy more than one. And you're correct, Mr. Johnson. You could buy a monthly pass and not use it. It starts the clock on your 31 days, or I can't remember if it's 30 or 31 days, starts the very first day that you use it. So people could be loading up on them. We limited that. We don't think that's happening, but we limited that. You can buy only 2 per transaction, and then theoretically you could get back in line and buy another one, or but we don't think we haven't experienced that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. All right, Brad, future meeting subjects.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted just to alert the members of the board that we have 2 more committees coming up on Wednesday, this Wednesday. We have at 10 o'clock our Personnel Committee is meeting, and I want to thank each of you. I believe all 15 members have turned in their performance evaluation for me to Chair Long's office, and they are compiling that for the Personnel Committee meeting on Wednesday. The Personnel Committee meeting will review the results and make a recommendation that'll come back to you at your February meeting on the evaluation and then on any compensation adjustment. Again, this is the last year that we'll be using this that 10-question Q&A kind of format, and we're going to a performance scorecard method a year from now. Then immediately following the Personnel Committee will be the Nominating Committee of PSTA, and the main item on that committee's agenda will be to make a recommendation on a new representative from PSTA's board to Ford Pinellas, because Mr. Johnson, who currently holds that role, will be leaving PSTA when he leaves the city of Clearwater at the end of March. So look forward to that. We have a number of folks that thankfully have expressed interest in that position, so we'll have a good meeting. We'll see if we can come up with a recommendation. Wanted to highlight that unfortunately we're missing our beach representative. Mr. Richard Bennett is recovering from surgery, and Patty Johnson is traveling with actually one of PSTA's employees, Ashley Handy, also in the Leadership Pinellas trip to Tallahassee today. And I heard that even though they're supposed to be doing Leadership Pinellas stuff, Patty promised that she was going to bring up transportation disadvantaged at every one of their discussions about how the state needs to support that. Last on my list is yet another award that PSTA has received. PSTA received a first place Ad Wheel Award from the American Public Transportation Association. These are advertising awards that are nationwide. We won first place in our category for our St. Pete Pride bus wrap and advertising of the park and ride services that we provided for the St. Pete Pride Parade, which were very successful last year. Now that first place award will now put us into the running for the grand prize overall award of the best advertising program to be nominated later this year.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Board member comments. We'll start with Commissioner Banter down at the end.
Yes, thank you. I believe we have Mr. Miller coming to our city commission meeting next week. So we look forward to him sharing the new innovative ideas that's helping areas of the county that are less serviced with Uber and Lyft and things like that. And I think we have our one-on-one on Wednesday after the personnel committee, but I would like for you to talk about the CPAS as well. At that presentation, I know we have SPC there in Tarpon, which I assume is already being serviced by that. But that would be good for the companies and businesses there in Tarpon to hear about that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Torringa.
Yes, I would like to just thank the entire staff of PSTA for the presentations today and for the materials that we received. It is interesting when you do get into all of the detail of what goes into making some of the plans, et cetera, and you look at the Title VI's of the 1964, et cetera, you realize that there are some issues that have to be taken into consideration that may not be open to immediate realization if you're thinking about planning. Well, how would you run a bus and where would you run a bus? And then when you take into some of the considerations that are before us, that are required to be before us. And I appreciate all of that detail and being able to see that, and it really does help to understand a little bit better how some of the planning goes. And I do appreciate the information that is presented to us by the different committees that we work here, because I know on the finance side or on the planning side, et cetera, I didn't bring up any questions about on the planning side regarding, for example, the commitment made on the autonomous vehicles. Obviously, I sit on the planning committee, and we did vote unanimously, as was pointed out, to go down this route. So just so everyone is aware of the fact that I think all of us are aware of each one of the elements that are presented to us here. And again, I do appreciate staff, and I do appreciate all the committees that meet and give us their input. So they've had a first look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torringa. Well said. Commissioner Justice.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Fenger.
Sure. Thank you. I would just add that at one of our recent work sessions, we had the pleasure of Mr. Whit Blanton from Forward Pinellas, as well as a representative from FDOT, present on complete streets, as well as the West Bay Drive plan. And we just had a really great discussion and attendance from other city commissioners at our meeting to have that discussion and integrate their discussion at our meeting as well. So it was a really good work session on behalf of what we can be possible improvements in the city. So that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Put your microphone on, please. There you go.
I don't know what happened there. I mentioned earlier the access to transit study and the importance of incorporating that into the community bus plan. I think it would be interesting to have a representative from FDOT come and address how they're implementing those coordination aspects on the upcoming construction projects going north on 19. It was mentioned that Patty Johnson is in Tally today. I will be going up to Tallahassee for the Florida League of Cities Legislative Action Days, be up there Tuesday and Wednesday, and if I could get another couple copies of those flyers on the legislative ask, I'd appreciate it. I'd like to highlight again the savings that are occurring through the joint purchasing with HART. Yeah, I think it was $50,000 over 5 years on these two contracts. We're working on this, and congratulations to staff on that. Then the only other thing is the regional transit feasibility plan, as it's moving forward, will involve a lot of public meetings, and I think it is very critical to, at those meetings, to talk about the challenges facing the community coming up. There was a ULI Trends conference last week where Tom James, Corinne Patel and Jeff Vinnick both talked about the challenges for this region. And of course, one of them was transportation, but others were education and jobs and getting to jobs. And what is needed as far as this community to raise general wage levels as to be a competitive community in the future. And I've been troubled that that kind of discussion hasn't been going along with that regional transit plan. So I'll say it again. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you. Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say a big congratulations to our staff and Brad and James Bradford for the SEIU labor agreement. I think a few of us can remember a few years ago that PSTA's relationship with some of our unions was not where we wanted it to be, and now we are where we want to be. So I know those negotiations take a lot of work, and just want to say thank you and congratulations to both sides. Just a little FYI, Scott Pringle is coming to the St. Petersburg City Council on February 8th to give a presentation on the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, and our council will undertake the process of writing a resolution in support of the feasibility plan. So I would think that at some point in time, as public discussion gets underway, that some type of resolution from this board would be a process we'd want to undertake.
Excellent. Thanks. Commissioner Schuman?
Thank you. I wanted to point out, we currently track the UPass numbers as far as ridership, and as CPass starts to grow, it may be worthwhile to track the CPass usage, both as a way of determining its effectiveness as well as also recruiting new CPass partners and showing that effectiveness. Also, several months ago, after attending the School Transportation Safety Committee meeting of Forward Pinellas, I reported that there was a potential change to the safe walk zones and transportation requirements for schools, dropping from 2 miles to 1.5 miles requiring transportation. That is continuing to move forward in this legislative session. So we'll see how that turns out, but it would require a 30% increase in transportation for the school district, and it would go into effect July of this year. So it may be worthwhile to be looking forward to how we might be able to work with the school district to take on some of that extra capacity need. And then finally, I just wanted to congratulate our new chairwoman for her successful completion of this meeting. Yes, so thank you for that.
Thank you. That was so thoughtful. Thank you very much. Commissioner Eggers? Please put your microphone
Everyone's
on.
going to do it. That was a good point. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. She was our chair last year. I don't know what I'd do if she wasn't chairing a meeting I was at. So it's good to have you chairing the group. Yeah, I would just say one thing real quickly. In 2018, we keep talking about it being a big year in transit and transportation in the area. Maybe not in ultimate decisions, but I think in moving the ball forward. And three things that strike me. One is that engagement continues to be a priority of all of our groups, and I think that really needs to be pressed by all of us as elected officials when we talk to groups around our cities and our county to please, when you get the opportunity, please engage in conversation about the future of transportation and transit. It's extremely important. The second thing is messaging, and I think it really talks to T-BARDA, TMA, PSTA, MPO, and it's so confusing to some of us, but it's mostly confusing to our residents. And so somehow that interconnectivity of groups needs to be always, it seems like every time we start a meeting, it should be up on the screen that talks about the different groups and the different things that they stand for, and say what we are doing today. We are part of that discussion, and it's just, we're talking about transit. It's part of a bigger conversation. So I think messaging is important, that we continue to have the same message between groups, but also that we point out why they're different, the different groups that are being talked about. Because confusion is not what we need this year. We need folks being crystal clear in what we're spending a lot of time on. And so messaging is the second thing that I was going to say. And transparency was the third, and that is sometimes we get a little frustrated that a local match is going to be necessary for all of this to happen. We certainly don't want to be getting the cart before the horse, but I think it's extremely transparent and responsible for all of us to say that there's a component that's going to be needed locally to make transportation and transit planning and implementation for our kids and our grandkids and their kids a reality. We've got to come up with a better plan. I really, the residents spoke in 2014 because I think partially the plan, they weren't ready for that plan. It didn't connect necessarily regionally, and it didn't really, we don't want to go asking for money every time there's a plan. But I do think the way we're doing it this time, talking about a regional approach is the way to do it. And so we have to be transparent, but at the same time, we have to continue to develop the product that we have to really show our residents that we're thinking responsibly for our kids and their grandkids. So anyway, just 3 distinct thoughts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very well said, Commissioner Eggers. Thank you. Commissioner Scott.
Nothing
Please
further.
put your mic on. Oh.
Thank you. Nothing further to add, but some great comments all the way around, and great job today.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Gerard.
Ditto. I have nothing.
Thank you. Commissioner Barkley.
First of all, I'd like to say congratulations. Mr. Smith's not here, but I'd like to congratulate James Bradford and Mr. Smith for a smooth transition on our labor agreement. That saves us both time and money in the various groups, including the Finance Committee that I chair. But in addition to that, it also makes for, I think, a better workforce and a happier workforce, so that when people are hopping on one of our buses, our drivers are happy campers, and they pass that image off to our riders. And I thank you very much for that. Second thing is, I want to congratulate us on that ad award. I'm sorry that the loyal opposition left already, but the ad awards are just another feather in our cap. We are working hard. The third thing is, on the Forward Pinellas, I'd like to thank Bill Johnson for your service on that, and I'd like to put my hat in the ring for that. I don't know who else has volunteered, but I'd like to volunteer for that as well. Fourth thing is, I'm sure you all saw on Facebook that Amazon picked the top 20 possible choices for their new second hub location, and we weren't on that list. But on Facebook, there was a list of all 20 of the other cities, which includes Miami, by the way. All of them have rail. And again, I'm sorry the loyal opposition didn't check that out, but that's an issue that has to be addressed. And finally, I'd like to wish a get well to Richard Bennett. He serves on one of my committees, and I appreciate his service, and I hope he gets well quickly. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Barkley. And lastly, I want to ditto all the comments that have already been made, and thank you all very much for your gracious patience as we worked our way through my first meeting as your chair. With all of your consensus, hopefully, I would like to ask Brad to invite Scott Pringle to come give us a brief summary of the transit feasibility plan. I know that a lot of us here have heard it already in the various and sundry boards and groups that we serve on, but I don't think we can hear it too much, because I do agree with Commissioner Eggers. Can you believe it?
No, I can't, but say it again.
I agree with you that the messaging is critical, and that we as a region are speaking with one voice and one message going forward. I think it would just help a lot. And then, once we hear the nitty-gritty of the feasibility plan, that we would be prepared to vote on a resolution to support T-BARTA and its work and the plan. I think that would lend a lot of credibility to our efforts to move regionally. And again, congratulate Brad, very sound congratulations on all the good work by you and our staff and Mr. Bradford, working with our unions. Those agreements can be very contentious, and I think we all have a lot to be proud of in terms of how we're moving forward. So bravo, great meeting, thank you all. See you again next month. And we are adjourned. Thank you. So glad. I have two, oh, thank you. No big messes.
Pleasure sitting next to you now. I moved down and you moved up.
Shoot it down, right now.
There we go.
Actually,